Hello everyone and welcome to another one of our videos. Today we're going to be going over the features of the FLEXI print RIP software for DTF. I wanted to do this video for a while now because a lot of customers that purchase the DTF units that we sell, they come equipped with this incredible software, which, as you will see in the next few minutes, as we dive into all the different features that this software has, you'll be able to customize all your prints right here from this particular software. So we're going to go ahead and start off by just going over the basic stuff on the menu, and then we're going to dive into importing a file and basically setting the settings. And those are going to be the ones that you're going to use every time you're going to send something to print. So right up here, right off the bat, what we're going to see is we're going to see obviously our job folder. This is the one that we are going to come to every time we're going to bring in a file for printing. Some of these other ones here are not highlighted because we don't have anything yet on our queue. So up here, we're going to see the different types of printers. Obviously, if you have this software, then you already have your printer installed. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go over the basic features and how to save that preset. So every time you send something to print, you actually can have the same prints and quality. We're going to start right here by opening a folder and looking for our file. But before I do that, what I want to do is I want to take you a couple of steps back to when we completed the actual gang up sheet in Photoshop. Now, we're not going to go over how to gang up. For that, I would refer you guys to look at one of our other videos, which basically covers, all the steps in Photoshop and a few other programs like Canva and Silhouette on how to gang up your sheet. I just want to take notice of what I have prepared, and as I save it, how I'm going to be saving it, because what comes next is to bring it into FLEXI. So it's important, number one, as you guys already know, that the file meets the size of what you can print. So in this case, I prepared a file that is under 21 inches wide and under 32 inches tall, right? And I'm going to be printing it in a 24-inch printer, but I could easily prepare this file for a 12-inch printer. So it doesn't really matter in this area of our conversation right now whether you're working with a 12-inch machine, a 13-inch machine, or a 24-inch machine. The FLEXI is going to be the same steps. The only difference is that, of course, your file would be a little bit more narrow in the case of the 12-inch or the 13-inch. So the first thing I want you guys to take notice of is that, when I prepare the file, I want to make sure that the canvas size and the image itself, as you can see right here, right, they are one and the same. I want that canvas to be as close as possible to the image itself, to the outer border, and by that I mean the border that starts here and ends here and starts up here and ends down here. Because that's going to be important as we move into the FLEXI program, so that we could accurately not only center what we're going to print, but also utilize every space available in your film. So now that I went ahead and I finished ganging it up and I got it saved as a PNG, all one layer, right? The steps are simple. We come back to FLEXI, we open, and we select that file. We open the file. And then what we're going to do is we're going to double click that file, and we're going to open here this FLEXI menu right here. Okay, this is what everybody gets. Now, if you're setting up FLEXI for the first time, there is a series of steps that we're gonna discuss as you start here on this first tab and work your way down to the last tab. Every one of these tabs has a function, and it's important for you guys to understand what each function does. Okay, so the first thing that I want you guys to take notice of is the fact that this file that I just opened right here is almost 21 inches, which is exactly coming into the size that I prepared in Photoshop, right? And right up here, you can see that on the right side starts at 0 and it ends in 24, right? So the film size here is 24.8. The first thing I could change here is the size of my film. So if I want my film to be 23 and a half, then all I have to do is make that correction right up here. This is your media size area right here. This is your job size area. And earlier when I mentioned about the job being as close, the canvas and the image itself to be as close as possible, this is the part that I was referring to. A lot of times customers, when they prepare the file in Photoshop or any of the other programs, their canvas size is actually bigger. So this blue line right here could be actually all the way over here. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to be, number one, it's an empty space. And number two, it's not going to let you print as wide as possible to the very edge of the film. You always want to leave some space on either side, perhaps a half an inch on either side. So that means that I could have taken this file all the way to 22 because my film, in fact, is 24 in this case, right? So again, if my file is for a printer that's a 12 inch, and then obviously if my film is 12 inch, the largest I want to go is 11 and a half, sometimes 11.75. But it's very important that that canvas and that image that's inside the canvas are one and the same, as close as possible, because that's going to allow us to be able to make that file as wide as possible if we need to, right? So the second thing that I want you guys to take notice of is obviously the properties of the job, which are right here, which are the same as the ones in Photoshop. See right here, 20.84 by 31.37. If I go back, there it is, exactly the same size. And obviously, my job size is 100% the accurate size. What does this mean? Well, it means that if I try to upsize or downsize my image, and I save this profile, every time you bring another file in and you use this preset, it will either shrink it or enlarge it, which you don't want to do that. All we want to do here is make sure that this number is at 100% always when we save our preset. Now up here, this is where our preset is. We don't have a preset set right now. So we're going to create one for the first time. I've already brought in my file. The first thing that you've already discussed is the size of your film, which is determined by your printer size, and your job size, which is basically within the area of whatever film size you're working with in your printer. Next, I want you guys to look at the very important feature, which is to mirror your image, right? So by clicking this F right here, this is going to mirror my job. So this is the first setting that I have to make sure that I adjust, right? The second one could be the rotation of the image. Now, I don't want to rotate my image. I want this little guy to look just like this, straight up. You have all these other options right here, but look what happens when I decide to go sideways, right? So now I'm chopping off my image in order to fit on this area. So my image has to always be like this. Why? Because I prepared my image like this, right? So it has to come in the same way, and that's where you have to click here for that. So that's as far as tab number one. So we're going to move on to tab number two, okay? Here, there's not much to do except after output. We always want to have hold, not delete. Why? Because after output, we build our own history. That history, at any time, we could go back and reinitiate that print yet again. So hold is where I want you to be at here. The next thing that you're going to see here is going to be basically the type of profile. Now this ICC profile that's here, it's going to control color, clarity, color intensity, vividness, all that stuff, right? So there's already one that it's built into here. We could download different ones if we need to. Some basic printers, like the 12-inch, operates with one particular ICC profile, which covers basically everything that you need. So it's already preset with everything that you want from factory. You can make changes to it, as you will see as we continue going forward. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm just selecting one of the many ICC profiles that we have available for the larger machine, which in this case is the 24-inch machine. Okay. Now, once I select that output profile, I'm going to discuss things like print mode, which is how many passes of ink the print head does, what basically is the DPI that the unit can actually output, which is in this case is 720 by 1080. Sometimes this is 720 by 720, sometimes is 1080 by 1080, sometimes it's 1080 by 1440. Again, that information, it's really technical when it comes to how many passes of ink is being deposited, and it directly affects how fast the machine can print. So like anything, we want things to be as fast and as good as possible, right? We don't want things super slow. So an output profile that's going to slow down the machine, it's not feasible for us to work with. We want something that prints fast. Now, we don't want it too fast, like 360 by 360, right? Or 720 by 720. We want a little bit of resolution. We want a little bit of brightness and color intensity. So most machines are going to operate in 720 by 1080 or 720 by 2400. And that gives you, I think, a good selection of color. It's going to give you good vividness, and it's going to maintain a rather good speed as it produces the film print. So we have that selected. The next thing that we're going to select is going to be the choke. So when I click on choke here, you can see the choke basically affects the spot white, which is the one thing you want to do. And choke, for those of you that are not familiar with that term, is basically the process where the white that's going to come in behind the colors, right? It's going to become smaller than the actual print. And so you're going to see an area of color around the border. And what that's going to do is it's going to avoid us ever seeing a little bit of white creeping up around the color, right? Because nobody wants to see that. And so what we'll do here is we'll double click on the distance. We're going to get this little area right here. We're going to select choke, and then a 0.10 is pretty good. Some people key in 0.15. Okay, so I would say somewhere between minimum of 10, maximum 15. 0.15 would be what we want to do. And then we want to click this one right here, was the choke, only the rip generated. Click OK. Now we have that setting. We're moving on. Click OK. Now from here, we're going to move on to the next tab. So now this next tab basically is, it's got the picture of the actual printer. This one right here are presets from factory. As soon as you go back here and you select this output profile, everything that comes next is going to be a default. So there's not much for us to really change here, nothing that we really want to change at all. The next after that comes something that a lot of people use. A lot of people tell me, well, if I've already ganged up this sheet and I want to be able to crop an area, I no longer want to do as many of these little sunflowers. In fact, I just want to do 4. Then I can just bring that over here. Now, notice that there are 2 types of arrows, right? There's this one, and then there's that one. Let me do it again. There's this one, and then there's that one. So I don't want to use that one. I want to use this one, right? 2 arrows pointing there, right? And that one I could use here, I could use here, right? Now, if I want to reset this without having to bring it back up, I can just come right here and hit reset. So that's going to give you exactly the size that you originally had. Again, you can crop from down here up, or you can go from up down. We can meet in the middle. We could do this one. So it all depends. Here it's repetitive because we have the same image all over across this area, but sometimes we have things in this corner that are different from the bottom, etc. So we could basically just move from the right, the left, and try to use, obviously, this little guy, right? Not that one. All right. So we're going to reset that and keep it right here. Next, we're going to move on to this little guy right here. So customers sometimes want to label the print job. They want the actual print on the side or on the top. So this right here, by clicking on print labels, we could put the printer name. I don't know what you would want that, but that option is there. You could put the job name. I can see that being something worthy of marking on the end of the print job. So she starts printing down here. By the time it concludes, you'll have the job, the print job at the end of that, telling you this job name is such and such. It can also tell you the number of copies. It could also tell you the page number. So we can select all of these things here, right? We can also make a special note, like made by Florida, or let's just put FlowFlex. So we could do that. We could customize it, or the message that you want to put there. So which is really good. Okay. So I'm not going to take that out. I don't really mark anything, but again, this is something that customers ask us to do that, and then so that's what's important to do that. I can also request the ICC profile. So let's say I'm changing profiles, because this profile that we're doing right now, we could very well create one differently for a different type of garment. Maybe we're doing one for dark shirts and another one for light shirts, and that'll come more into play as we move into the other settings that we're still yet to see. And so, again, I could put the output profile so that I know how that file was printed, absolutely, the resolution, etc. So as far as labels go, this is as far as you can go. You can also customize, obviously, your text and your font and the size of your font and the position where you want to put it, whether it's on the top, on the right, the bottom. So you can have it here, you can have it at the bottom, you can have it on the top. Moving on from this particular location here that we're in, we're going to go to the next tab. Now, this tab is one that many customers like to play around with, because everyone is always looking for that vividness or that extra contrast on the file. And so this is going to allow you to increase the vividness and the contrast, right? Now, remember, we're making changes that either we're going to save on this profile for this particular job, or we're going to use it on all the jobs coming up. So remember, once we're done making these alterations and we save what we're going to do, this profile could be something that you could do all the time, or you can do it on some jobs. Okay, so you have the freedom to decide that, but most customers work with one or two profiles, and then that just makes it way easier to be able to keep track of how you're outputting your jobs, because that's one of the worst things to do is trying to match up something you've already printed previously. So again, it's important for us to not go crazy and start changing way too many things. Okay. Another thing that it's used a lot is this little tool right here. These are variations. Okay, and now we're going back to the, when you make variations at the time that you're here in this particular queue where you're sending stuff to print. Once the stuff gets printed, the information could be lost. That file could be deleted. We'll never know exactly what we did. So I always recommend you guys, if you are making changes to the job or to the image that you're going to print, do that in Photoshop. Do it in your other programs where you can save multiple files, and you can make notes of how that file is different than the other one. Because if we come in here and we click this little box right here, it's really super cool, because it could make me change the hue of the color. I could make it redder, or I could make it more magenta, or I can lean it more towards the blue, more green. So what's going to happen is, if I select one of these, and this is my original right here on the top, and the bottom is the setting that I'm going to change. So once I make that change and I save, obviously, I have to keep track of what I did. I have to make a note of that, because if, God forbid, 3 weeks from now or 3 months from now, the customer wants the same thing printed. Well, if we made alterations, there's chances that you're not going to match up what you're printing again. So that's something that we have to use very carefully, right? So that's why I keep referring you guys to go back to your particular software of use, whether it's Photoshop, Illustrator, or Canva, or Silhouette. Any of those programs are going to allow you to make these alterations of color and allow you to save the file, particular file, with those changes so that you can keep track of what you're doing as you're doing it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of here, but I just wanted you guys to see how I got to here by using this little button right up here. Okay, so again, not a problem using the vividness. I mean, you can increase it as far as you want to here, the contrast. Just be real careful with this variations key right here, because that could throw the color off way off base. Okay. Next, we are right here in this particular area right here where we can do separations of color. That's not something we're going to need to use. So I'm going to skip over this one and move on to one that actually has real use. Like, for example, if I go back to my Photoshop file, and I know that this is a transparent background, but I'm just want to double check what aspects of this file are what color. Remember that the machine prints cyan, magenta, yellow, black. That's your CMYK, and it also prints white. So if I click on preview, okay, and I leave it set on cyan, it's going to give me a cyan areas. If I switch to magenta, then I could do magenta, I could do cyan and magenta, I could do yellow. So it's showing me everything as a preview. This is my black areas, and then this is my white areas. Okay, so what's going to happen here is I have the ability to select what I'm going to print, and what I want to do is I want to double check that everything that I'm going to print is actually going to come out. And this is a way to preview each individual channel and make sure that, number one, the area that it's going to print in white, it's actually that area and not the entire area. That's basically one of the things that most customers want to take a look at. They want to double check that everything is going to come out the way it's supposed to. Next, we're going to move on to no, we're not going to do anything on this tab because it doesn't function anything. This one right here also is a tab that really has very little use for us. This one right here is one that it's worthy of a lot of explanation. This one right here is our color control. So once I'm in this tab right here, I could move my cursor over here to the right where the design is. And as you can see, as I move it across different areas, notice up here in the original color and the output color, what I'm getting. I'm getting actual RGB values, right? So this file is a PNG. So because it's a PNG file, it has RGB values for color. Our machines, they print with CMYK plus a white. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at how one color is the file and the second is the output, right? So that means the machine or the RIP has to convert this RGB file into a CMYK file in order to print it. And so when that translation occurs, you could lose a little bit of information. And this is where colors don't come out exactly the same. Now, it's very difficult to color match a color. This tool right here is excellent because it allows you to, let's say, select this yellow, and it's giving me this value right here, this RGB value, and it's also giving me this CMYK value, right? Now, if I double click on this, I get this window. And this window is basically the window where I could tell them, the software, I want you to convert it from what this is to this. And I'll have to take my chances because the machine is going to interpret the color and say, I think it's this value right here, which is 1% cyan, 5% magenta, 100% yellow, and a little bit of black, right? Don't worry about the spot white because the spot white is 100% all the time in the areas where the white should go. And the white is controlled in another tab, which is the very last tab we're going to next. So don't worry about the spot white here. This translation right here that we're trying to look for is whether we want to match it completely. So in other words, I don't want you to convert it. I want you to try to get as true to this RGB as possible. So when I click here from RGB to RGB, I'm basically telling the machine, don't interpret the color, just give me what I have here and as close as possible. Okay. And the only other setting that we want to look at is right here, apply to all. That means all the yellows, because that's what I selected. I selected that yellow. Okay. It's not going to affect any other color, just the yellow. Okay. And once I click OK, then I'm back over here again. Again, this is not a setting that I want to make permanent. This is just a setting that I may decide to use in a job because this one customer is very picky about the color in particular. Okay, so I'm just going to cancel out of here. Just wanted to show you guys that. If I want to delete that, then I'll just click here, delete, and it's gone. I could have multiple ones here. I could do one for the blue, one for the green, one for the yellow, etc., etc. I could do all of those targetings. I could do that. The last tab is the tab that has the control of the white. So what we're doing here is we're controlling how much white we're depositing, and obviously we are doing two things here, right? We're going to do the spot white, make sure that it's on spot white, make sure that it's on the setting of white that you want. We're going to go over each of these two right here so that it actually gives us what we need. And I'll go over them right now. The alpha channel data is the one that we want to use for the back of the solid area. So we need to have this one checked. And then it's up to us to decide whether we want to use a solid under or we're going to use a transparency mask. Okay? The end of the day, either one of these would actually work fine. The transparency has a feature where if you're not doing vector stuff and you're doing, let's say, pictures or things with halftones, it's a much softer load of white in the back of that print, which ideally that's the one you want to select. And like I said before, most customers are willing to create multiple presets so that if they're doing something with halftones, then they could work with that one. And if they're doing things that are vector, then they'll use solid under, which is the next one under right here, which is very, very popular. That's probably the one that 8 times out of 10 we're using. Okay, so let's just start with the solid under. And as you can see, the density of the white is at 100%. And then the density of the white behind black is 100%. So now, one thing is to print white behind a color, and another thing is that color being black. Because black is so dense and so strong, then what's going to happen is you might get a little bit of dripping going on as the machine lays down the white behind the black, solid black. So these numbers have to change. These numbers have to go down. So what I would recommend is to basically bring this down to maybe 70% of white. That's a pretty good quantity. The white behind the black, some people lower it down to 60, maybe 55. Again, the idea is to, number one, don't overload your prints with white. And white does present a barrier against when we're pressing on dark materials. So obviously we don't want to lower that below, 50%, because then we're going to sacrifice coverage on darker materials, and then our colors will come out more muted, and that's not what we want. So you just have to do your test, figure out what setting is better for you. I would suggest anything above 60%. For the white density, and then anything somewhere between 50 and 60% for your white behind black, solid black. In the case of the transparency mask, well, when I switch to transparency mask, the white density behind black is no longer a factor. That pretty much gets whited out. You're not going to be controlling that. The system is going to control that, and it's going to load a very minimal amount. Then the last thing that you have here is still the white density. So the white density, we can keep it at 70. We can put it at 60. Again, when we're dealing with halftones and things like that, the amount of ink is much less. So that's why transparency mask works better for that. And 70% it's a pretty decent amount of white to put. Okay. So now that we've arrived at the end of all our tabs, right, and we've already made these settings, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go save as up here. This is the yellow little icon. And I'm going to get this little window. And this little window is every tab that we actually played around with before. And what we want to do is we want to select all, make sure everything is selected. And then I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to name this preset. So before I mentioned about naming it based on what you want to use it for. So in this case, we're going to do transparency mask. So I'm going to do DTF, transparency mask. And what we're going to do is we're going to put that we actually added a choke, which is, 0.15. So we can do 0.15, mm. So that's our choke. We could also put for halftones if we want to put for halftones. And then later we'll create a second one for solid under, which is going to be for vector files. And again, we can name it however we like. That's going to be our preset basically for that. You can make it a read-only file. So if you're working in an environment where multiple people are using the software and you don't want anyone to change your preset, absolutely, you can click that read only and then stays like that. Keep in mind that if I click the read only, if I have to come back here and make a change on this particular preset, I won't be able to do anything with that. I'll have to delete it and restart again from scratch. So what I recommend for you to do is to start by saving it as a standard file. Don't save it as a read-only, because then if you've forgotten to make a particular change that you wanted, or you made a change that you didn't want to keep, then you can't undo that. You have to delete that preset and start again. So right now, we're going to save it as is, and then this is going to go up here, right? And this is where we need to do every time that you bring a file into your FLEXI and you double click it before you send it from this key right here that we're going to use to send the job to print. We're going to click the drop down and select this particular setting. This is basically our preset with all the functions that we went over, with all of the tabs that we actually made use of. And again, if we want to switch between transparency mask and our solid under, everything else should stay the same. The only thing that's going to change here is our solid under. Or maybe we want to create a lower intensity of white setting for like when we're doing light color shirts and things like that. A lot of customers tell me, is it necessary to even keep the white behind? Well, what happens is there's always the need to have a little bit of white. I always recommend prints to have some level of white, because white allows the powder to stick onto that area better, and it gives you more flexibility because the film of the ink is actually thicker with the white behind it. Even if it's at 20%, even if it's at 30%, just add a little bit of white back there, even if you're going on white t-shirts, right? Now, obviously that's different than if you don't want to print white in the area where the white goes. So if I go back to Photoshop and I'm looking at this file right here, well, this file right here, right, has white in this area, white in the eyes, white in the teeth, right? So if I don't want this white to print, then what I should do is I should select this white in Photoshop or Canva or Silhouette and obviously eliminate that white, so that when I delete that white, it actually gives me the transparent background in there, and then that's what the shirt color will come through there. And I want to bring that file just like that into FLEXI. So FLEXI is not going to take off the white for you. It's only going to decrease the amount of white behind the color, right? So if I don't want to print white in that section, you're not eliminating that white. That is your print white. That's the white that's going to get printed along with the color in those areas. So as long as your file contains white, it will print white in those areas. All you're controlling back here in the FLEXI is the amount of white behind the colors, okay? So just because you have it at 0 doesn't mean it's not going to print white. It will print white in that section where the white goes. And again, a little bit of white goes a long way. Make sure that things are more sturdy, more stable in the wash, and then you don't, nothing falls apart before it's supposed to. So if I just want to go ahead and do a final change and change it to solid under and select this setting right here, that should work. I'm going to come back over here and do another save as. And then in this time, make sure that everything is selected, and I'm going to go OK, and then I'm going to name it DTF, solid under. And now I could also put that fact that this has a choke of 0.15. And then if I want to put, you know, a particular setting for dark shirts, I could actually do dark shirts. And then that way I know that this white density that I have here is at 70%. I could also make a note of that. I could put white 70%. I could do that. There we go. So now we know. And if I want to make yet a third preset that would have less quantity of white as the back of the color goes, then I could go ahead and put light shirts and then put maybe 30% if I want to put it at 30 or 25, whatever I want to put it at. Again, the read-only option is entirely up to you. If you're sure that these are the settings you're not going to change, absolutely click on that and save. So here I go, and I'm going to save that. So as you can see, it's changed. So here we have solid under, and then we have transparency. So every time I switch it, it's going to make that little switch. You saw how it went from that to that to that. And that's basically the end of that. When it's time to send it to print, I could click on send, or I could click OK. If I click OK, all that I did was basically I'm in a holding pattern here. I haven't sent it to print, but all my settings are in place. And I have a little area right here that tells me what the resolution is going to be, what kind of ICC profile I've chosen. All of the other things are not going to show up here in this little area, but you do get a nice little preview of the file depending on what particular FLEXI you guys are working with, if it's updated, if it's the latest version, if it could be a version that's about a year old or whatever. You may not necessarily get a preview, but you will definitely have your settings all the same. So basically the same menu will be available for all the FLEXIs, regardless of the age of the program. So as you can see up here, I have two options. I can rip or I can print, right? So people always ask, well, what's the difference between ripping and printing? Well, the difference is that if I click on rip, it's going to rip the file, but it's not going to send it to the printer. But if I select send to the printer, then it'll go through the process of ripping, and from ripping, it'll go to the output, and it would actually print. For those of you that are working with a 12-inch machine, that machine obviously runs with a second software, and I will do a video on that software separately because I don't want to confuse guys that are printing directly from FLEXI directly to the printer. And we do have some printer setups that are like that. And so at this point, I just want to say thank you guys for watching our video. If you guys have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And again, keep coming back to look for these videos. If you like the content, please like our videos, and obviously get that notification signal on, because that way you'll know and you'll be notified as soon as we load something else that might be beneficial for you guys. Thanks again, and thank you for watching.